You weren't around when the kids went missing. Let me tell you, never use a white envelope. That's why she went pale and ran from you. Why? You really want to know? Fine, but you're getting all the details you don't want. I was a student at the high school here when it was happening. 3 kids had gone missing when the rumors started. And you know high schoolers. They were ridiculous, crime-laden falsities. The police never found the truth, either. And those of us who lived through it really only know the half-truths we could bear to witness. The 4th went missing, and then the 5th. Number 5 was Marcus Sanson. We had government together our senior year. He was a quiet kid, always wore a ratty hoodie. His hair was long and it looked like he brushed it once every 2 days, maybe. It was a public high school, so it was easy to assume he never had a lot of money at home, or hell, he even worked a full-time job after school, and that's why he showed up such a mess. But if you ever talked to the kid, he was actually insanely kind. He didn't want the attention or praise, but he'd just help without being asked. Number 6 was Samantha Albright. She sat next to me during that class and would doodle between her notes. She wasn't very good, but sometimes I liked to peek at what she had. Eyes with uneven lashes, lopsided hearts, and the letters S plus M in poor calligraphy. I assume it was Marcus, what the M stood for. Samantha was this horrible combination of utterly unlucky and completely optimistic. So when her pencil broke and she was fishing in her backpack for a replacement, it was usually Marcus who offered her a sharpener or one of his. Or when her papers fell, you get the idea. He was too kind and she was too unlucky. I guess Marcus was unlucky too. When he started showing up to class with bruises under his eyes so dark you'd think he never slept, it was regarded as normal. Maybe he got 2 jobs instead of just 1. Then there were the weird scribble shapes on his hands in blood and ink. He got a couple of green passes after he showed up with that. Oh, right. Those were summons to the counselor's office. White was general, green was counseling, pink was leaving school grounds. I think there was a yellow one too, but I don't remember what that one was for. Anyway, he was getting worse and worse, and there was one day where he stopped being nice. Not mean, just not nice anymore. He was scribbling in a notebook almost non-stop. And he was so hyper-fixated on it, like he couldn't stop writing. I only really noticed when Samantha asked me if she could borrow a pencil. It was honestly surprising she had to ask. I guess we all took Marcus for granted. So I gave her a pencil, and that's when I started to pay attention to him. And he just wrote and wrote and wrote. He wasn't taking notes. Our teacher didn't talk that much. He started missing classes. Samantha started making 2 copies of notes on those days, which was kinda cute. I was rooting for her at this point. She was so obvious. Then one day, before the bell rang, Marcus walked up to Samantha and handed her a white envelope. His hands were shaking, and he looked worried and nervous as all hell. They had the cute basic pleasantries. For me? A nod. Oh, thank you, Marcus. Bell rang. They sat down. Samantha opened the envelope immediately. Like I said, I was rooting for her at this point, so I kept glancing over to her, trying to parse out her expression. Figure out if it was a love confession or poetry or something. But she just stared at it, all class, kind of confused and dumbfounded look on her face. I was kind of worried, like, oh, maybe he finally snapped and told her to buy her own damn pencil sharpener. Next day, things were weirdly normal. Calm before the storm, I guess. Marcus was in class, though he really looked ill. and Samantha was diligently taking notes and doodling in the margins again. But when I looked, I wouldn't exactly call them doodles, really. They were strange, twisted letters and coarse spirals. Honestly, it made me uncomfortable to look at them. When I did, the shapes in my peripheral vision seemed to twist and move toward me. They stopped when I looked, like an optical illusion. It made my skin crawl. And she wouldn't stop writing them. They grouped and spread like letters, making words, making sentences, but it was just gross and awful, like I said. So I tried not to look too much. Eventually, Marcus stopped showing up to class. Permanently. Samantha didn't take a single note for him, as if she knew before the rest of us did. Marcus disappearing really shook us. We had a whole school assembly over safety procedures, and a few volunteer police came into some of our classes to talk more directly with us and answer questions. Rumors spread like wildfire and left fear as ash. It's really stupid and honestly rather silly, but I knew something was wrong when Samantha stopped using pencils and started using black pens instead. She was too unlucky for ink. It would run on the page or dry up, or she'd mess up and need to erase. So when she started using a pen, I almost offered her a spare pencil. I had one ready for her, but she never asked for it. She was just writing, pumping out almost printer-perfect script of those same damned symbols, though. No letters, no English. It was a full page of this awful, crawling language that fell into and out of the paper that tried to hold it. Sharp curves and light edges curling together at a part. It made me dizzy. And that's not being used as an expression. I had a horrible case of vertigo from looking at her paper. The teacher even stopped to ask if I was okay. I was tempted to go to the nurse when she offered, but I didn't want to answer stupid questions. It was too weird, so I pushed through and stayed. Samantha never stopped writing. Eventually her hands started to look dry and bruised around the fingers, the pattern matching the shape of the pen she gripped it. Her hair started to look messy and unkempt, held back in petty ponytail to try and keep it out of her eyes as she wrote. She started getting green passes, and then the space under her eyes darkened until they looked like two black moons. It was easy to notice on Samantha. She wore makeup and pastels, so when she showed up without it and bruises instead, everyone got to talking. We knew. At the root of every rumor was a truth we all felt in our bones. Samantha was next. Some people avoided her, afraid whatever it was could spread. Others tried to reach out, either out of genuine concern for her or because they were playing detective and trying to figure out which rumor was closest. The most I did was offer her a pencil. I thought maybe she could revert back one step at a time. But when she declined, I didn't push. I don't know what I could have done. From what I've heard, she passed out 3 white envelopes. I only saw her hand off one in that same government class. She handed it to Angel Garcia, who was not number 7. He was number 1 of a new and awful trend. As was the pattern, it wasn't long after Angel got his note that Samantha stopped showing up to class. We didn't really learn anything about her for a while. We were all sick and scared, and the teacher had to have a tissue box on her desk to stop any tears. It got empty pretty quickly. I don't think I was the only one watching Angel. A few others had noticed the note passing from Marcus to Samantha to Angel, and the same thing happened with him. He opened that pristine white envelope and stared at it, confused, a little scared. Mouth hung open a little as he tried to concentrate. He startled when the bell rang, having been staring at it the whole class period. A few other students went missing, ones I'd passed in the hallway or saw in a play. A lot of kids transferred too. I couldn't. Didn't really live anywhere near the other schools, and homeschooling wasn't an option. My dad's dead, and my mother works 2 jobs, so I kept tabs on Angel, and I decided never to touch a white envelope. When number 9 went missing, it started to become a pretty solid rule. Don't open white envelopes. The teachers tried to dismiss this hysteria and calm the fear, but eventually they too stopped writing on white paper. It was just a thing. I wanted to catch Angel with the white envelopes. I wanted to turn him in when he had them, so the envelopes could be destroyed and he could be saved from whatever it was. But that never happened. It was after school, and the buses were a little late because they were helping with a field trip or something. So we were grouped here and there in the courtyard and across the sidewalk talking and waiting, and the buses started showing up. Now, to get to us where we can board, they go down the street, into the bus lane, which sits between the school and the student parking lot, and then they get to go back out into the street again. They go slow down the bus lane, obviously, but since they were late, they were speeding up a bit on the street before the turn. Angel was next to his car. And then he was on the sidewalk. And then he was everywhere. The pavement, the crossing sign, the grill of his own car, and the tires of the bus. I think we all saw it. Every one of us felt that twisted magnetic pull to look at Angel as he timed his last step. We saw the blood splatter and curl as it made those same damned shapes in the puddles. And we all saw, bright and clear against the dark crimson before they soaked through, 4 white envelopes. Angel was the first suicide, and I honestly have to respect him for it. He knew what was happening, that it spread, and instead of passing it on or meeting someone else's defined destiny, he decided his own fate. We talked about him a lot. There was an assembly again. Now counselors and therapists came in to talk to us all. We all had a class session, and we had a mandatory one-on-one session too. For everything, I guess the school really tried what it could, but even their hands were tied since, well, no one knew. Couldn't trace it. When the police got the envelopes from Angel's body, they were so soaked through the ink inside had run. No matter what we told them, they insisted they were suicide notes. More kids went missing, but more started to follow Angel's example too. Eventually, after a year or 2, there was one last suicide. One last mess of white envelopes at our school. I can only guess that they've spread to other towns, other schools, handed off to people at clubs and stores and concerts until they weren't at our school anymore. There were too many notes and too little suicides for them all to be gone. So if you want to pass out notes to people, pick a different color. And rest up tonight. The story drained the color from your face. You look awful. You've got bags under your eyes and everything.